People on the radical left, politically correct people, tend to be very high in agreeableness, but they tend to be very low in conscientiousness. And that begs the question about whether or not their tolerance is a consequence of their avowed love of other people, or their hatred for the fact that any structured society requires adherence to a shared set of ordered beliefs and the capacity for people to compete within those ordered beliefs to attain, let's say, success or victory.
We welcome debate. We understand that the gem sitting at the core of Western civilization is that contest of ideas. And it's only with that contest of ideas that you rid a society of the dumb ideas and allow the best ideas to triumph. And without free speech, that piece of intellectual machinery stops to work, comes to a grinding halt.
Today, all you hardcore leftists call yourselves social justice warriors, and you do this because you believe that individual justice is racist and sexist and bigoted and homophobic. Individual justice suggests that we each be held responsible for our actions, but SJWs think that's unfair because we're not just individuals, of course, we're members of groups. What if the groups are disproportionately poor? What if they're disproportionately in jail? How can we achieve group justice if individual justice keeps getting in the way? Right? If it turns out that certain groups have more members in jail disproportionately, that must be because something deeply wrong has happened, something, the system is rigged against that group. It can't be because a lot of individuals within that particular group have committed crimes. Now, the problem with this logic is it sounds sort of bad. If you think of people only in terms of their racial or ethnic groups or their sexual orientation, that's sort of racist, it's sort of homophobic, it's actually sort of discriminatory. You're not any better a person for being black or gay or Jewish. Race doesn't mean anything. Social group is only important if the social group is propagating good things. If you just arbitrarily group people about skin color, that's just called tribalism.
Justice means there's structure and rules, and the people who abide by the structure and play by the rules and move towards the top win. And mercy means we're forgiven our failures so that we can rise up and play again. But you can't have one without the other because the world falls apart if you do. And this is my problem with tolerance, because tolerant people, first of all, let's say those who proclaim the virtues of tolerance, believe that they're tolerant, but generally that's not the case. They just don't want to accept the responsibility that playing by the rules would bring. And being useless and unable to move towards a valuable goal and failing to hold anyone else accountable as a consequence of their equivalent failures does not make you tolerant. It just makes you unable to move forward in the world in any productive manner.
To understand that, for example, the left once used the language of liberty in terms of classical libertarian notions of human rights. It understood that that was how you fought for women's liberation, that was how you fought for gay liberation. The left once understood that censorship was an illiberal travesty. And yet 30 or 40 years later, 30 or 40 years ago, something dramatic changed. And it changed because the very definition of human rights changed. And it changed because academics such as Ronald Dworkin defined the most important right, human right, as being the right to equal concern and respect. Now you think about that, the equal concern and respect. What kind of human right is that? But that's what started the growth of the Human Rights Commissions, it's what started the anti-discrimination legislation, because feelings became the lingua franca of the human rights debate. It recalibrated the whole movement of human rights towards victimhood.
They want fairness, not fairness of opportunity or fairness of rights, fairness of outcome, cosmic justice. Now, individual fairness of outcome cannot be achieved by government interventions, and SJWs know this. So instead, they suggest that the reason that individuals aren't achieving individual fairness is because of collective unfairness, right? Victim groups have been sinned against. The real reason that some groups are less successful in America than others, or some individuals are less successful than others, that's because of white privilege, right? According to the left, if there is inequality of outcome, that's because there's shadowy white privilege. It's living in the shadows, squashing people of other colors. White privilege is inherent in everything, from capitalism to free speech. Any system that doesn't result in racially diverse results, that must be the result of white privilege. So we have to tear down white privilege. And this is a really seductive idea. The campus left simply gives people this feeling of virtue by counting them members of victimized identity groups. If you're an underachieving black woman, the left says you're underachieving not because of the decisions that you've made, but because the system hates you. If you're an underachieving gay Hispanic man, you must be failing because the system targets people like you. According to the campus left, the only people who certainly have not been victimized are, of course, white heterosexual cisgender males. Right? The system was built to benefit them. The founding fathers designed a governmental, economic system to protect their own interests at the expense of minorities everywhere. This white privilege, say all these members of the campus left, extends to every area of American life. It's totally inescapable. You're born into it if you're white. You're born with a heavy burden on your back that can never, ever be alleviated if you're born non-white or non-straight or non-male. Now, there is good news for those of us who are white, heterosexual, cisgender males. There is a way to relieve ourselves of this burden. All we have to do is shout shame at ourselves. Right? If we shout shame at ourselves and we acknowledge that the system is privileged in our favor, then everything's cool again.
Part of what's happening in the United States is an increasing conflict between people of different temperaments. And we don't really understand how to mediate between that anymore. And those who are on the tolerant end of the political distribution tend to think of those who are their opposites as intolerant, but they're not necessarily intolerant. They're also justice-seeking. And justice is one of the hands, as according to Jung, that God uses to keep the world in balance. And so, I guess I'd like to conclude that by pointing out that it's a very rough situation in the political realm when either sides of a temperamental distribution make the a priori proposition that their particular temperament stands for the only virtues that are dominant and ceases to talk to the other side. And we're in that situation right now, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
You know, in the 1920s and the 30s, the National Socialists had their own private army to disrupt meetings of those who supported the Weimar Republic or who dared to criticize Adolf Hitler. Now, there's no chance whatsoever, none whatsoever, that Hitler and the National Socialists, the Nazis, would have achieved power without the Sturmabteilung, or the SA, organized street thugs that silenced opposition voices through disruptions, street violence, ripping down opposition posters, and, a little murder here and there. The Chinese communists did it particularly well. That's where this term that the progressives are so proud of comes from, by the way, political correctness. It was a term used by Mao Zedong, who, having killed 50 million of his own people in the name of income inequality and free health care, encouraged cadres of wild-eyed students who beat, intimidated, humiliated, and eventually killed anyone who disagreed with their socialist utopia.
Just because we think that the way we view the world is, what would you say, virtuous, that doesn't mean it isn't with its attendant vice, and it also doesn't mean that all the vice that we don't have stacks up on the other side of the political distribution. Now, if we insist upon assuming that it does, then we're going to divide the West in particular. We're going to divide the West the way that it's dividing in the United States and the way that it's increasingly dividing in Europe. And that won't be a happy day for any of us.
We cannot fix where you started in life. We can't. That's beyond your control. That's beyond my control. But the notion of white privilege suggests you can never, under any circumstances, overcome where you started in life. Because there's this big bear called white privilege that's trying to eat you. That if you make it, even if you make all the right decisions, white privilege will stand in your way. That is a lie. But it is a lie that this campus obviously promotes. In 2013, the History Department created mandatory diversity training, giving out handouts on the re-education process, which sounds kind of Orwellian, needed for white people to overcome racist conditioning. This university has sponsored a multitude of events on white privilege and supported the lying Black Lives Matter movement.
Left-wing protesters made up of Bernie Sanders supporters, Black Lives Matter thugs, public sector union muscle, and museum-grade idiots with tenure have done the following. On March 19, 2016, they attempted to stop drivers from attending a Donald Trump rally in Arizona, stopping traffic for 90 minutes and inconveniencing and, in fact, imperiling the lives of both those headed to the rally and those simply in a rush to get to their doctor's appointments or to pick up their kids after school. On March 12th, professional protester Thomas DiMassimo rushed the stage at a Trump event. He didn't like what Trump has to say, so in true progressive fashion, he determined to force his opinion on everyone else and make sure that they didn't get to hear it either. On March 11th, Progressive rioted at a Trump rally in Chicago, and when Trump canceled it due to safety concerns, they celebrated their victory over opposing ideas by calling him a coward. But as I said, this violence is not about Trump. It's about the way they do business on the left. If this were just about Trump, then none of the rest of this would make any sense. On March 18th, gay conservative Milo Yiannopoulos was banned from speaking in San Francisco. No concrete reason was given. Milo speculates that he was too gay for San Francisco to tolerate. On February 25th, Cal State students blocked the doors so that they or anyone else would not have to hear Ben Shapiro talk about campus bullying. Once inside the venue, the protesters activated the fire alarm. They also assaulted a disabled man, a liberal who it turns out, who simply wanted to hear what Shapiro had to say. On November 9th of last year, University of Missouri assistant fascist Melissa Click assaulted a student journalist, famously calling for some muscle to attack non-progressive reporters. On November 7th of 2015, Yale students disrupted a William F. Buckley event. One student was removed by force and several attendees were spat upon. Now look, you can see that at this rate, going just with the reported incidents of suppression, assault, and intimidation was going to take longer than a Fidel Castro speech. But it is interesting, isn't it, how the left will disrupt a peaceful expression of differing opinions with violence and then accuse the people holding those differing opinions of starting the whole thing.
Vice is a very complicated thing, and the fact that it often comes clothed in the guise of virtue makes it even that much more difficult to understand. But it's necessary to note that even in your moments, even in those moments where you think that you're at your best and proclaiming virtues that you think are universal, you may have a blind spot that makes it impossible to talk to people who don't think the same way that you do, and then you might frighten yourself after that realization by coming to understand that people that you can't talk to, you can only fight with.
When he or she sees the word racist or xenophobic being used to shut down debate, call it for what it is. When he or she sees a government using the word consensus or demanding bipartisanship on an issue to shut down genuine debate, and we saw that often with Kevin Rudd, call that for what it is too. If he or she sees political correctness settling in over a debate, stifling ideas and stopping us from thinking and speaking freely, call that out too as an unacceptable constriction on free speech in a Western democracy. If he or she sees feelings and the right not to be offended trumping the right to free speech, well, call that out too, because that would be a terrific change.
When we're congratulating ourselves on our virtues, we might attend a little bit to our vices, and that might make it easier for us to stretch out our hands and to engage in conversation those people who share beliefs that are different than ours that we are increasingly unwilling and unable to talk to.
It was through robust debate that we had a better conversation, for example, about multiculturalism, where we talk not just about the rights of being a citizen, but the responsibilities of being a citizen. It was because of a robust debate around education that we started to talk more seriously about issues of accountability and transparency and a decent curriculum and going back to basics. It was only because of a robust debate on Indigenous affairs that we've dragged the Labor Party to the centre on these issues too. So free speech is not some academic pursuit. It is a healthy contest of ideas, affects the way we live every single day.
Racial diversity doesn't mean anything. Decency means everything. Diversity isn't good unless the people who are racially diverse are doing good things. Diversity isn't bad unless the people doing bad things are racially diverse. Diversity isn't our strength. Decency is our strength.
Some of the blame for the marginalisation of free speech as the most fundamental of human rights must be worn by those on our side of politics, I think. Because I think we have let the left take over this debate. We let them redefine what human rights meant. We let them talk about it as part of their agenda. I think we dropped the ball on this issue.
And historic discrimination does not explain current levels of inequality. It certainly doesn't justify discrimination against white people who had nothing whatsoever to do with Jim Crow. Individuals all over America experience inequality. Some of us are born rich, some of us are born poor, some of us are born smart, some of us are born protesters. Right? Nobody is capable of righting wrongs done to people 3 generations ago by penalizing their great-grandchildren. You can't do that. The solution to historic injustice is not modern injustice.
We just live right now, the generation of kids that are coming through. Everybody gets a damn trophy, okay? You finish last, you come home with a trophy. You kidding me? I mean, what's that teaching kids? It's okay to lose. And unfortunately, it's our society. It's what we're building for. And it's not just in basketball, it's in life. You know, everybody thinks they should get a job. Everybody thinks they should get a good job. No, that's not the way it works. But unfortunately, that's what we are preparing for. Because you finish fifth, you walk home with this nice trophy, parents are all excited. No. I mean, not to be too blunt, but you're a loser. Like, we're losers. We got beat. So you lost. There is no trophy for us. But unfortunately, the way these kids are brought up today, there is a trophy. Because nobody wants anybody to have hard feelings. Nobody wants to get their feelings hurt. Well, unfortunately, in the real world, I'm not sure how it is with your all's jobs. But with mine, if you lose enough, you get fired. And that's just the way it is. And I'm trying to explain to our kids, like, hey, I'm trying to prepare you for the real world. Because when you go to get a job, there's competition. And what are you going to do to stand out? But unfortunately, we're not preparing these kids, before they get to us at least, to be ready for that.